your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us. An Alberta pilot is the third person to die battling wildfires across Canada this year. The Transportation Safety Board says the 41-year-old man from Whitecourt, Alberta, died after his helicopter involved in firefighting efforts crashed in the northwestern part of the province. He was the lone person on board when it went down. Emergency officials say the aircraft is in a marshy area northeast of Peace River. The chopper was operated by Valhalla Helicopters, which declined to comment on the crash. As of Friday morning, emergency officials in Alberta say there were 119 active wildfires burning in the province. Of those, 16 were out of control and 44 were being held. Alberta wildfires say 69% were caused by lightning, 13% are classified as suspicious and under investigation. Alberta has seen 872 wildfires so far this year. And Cypress County has become the latest region to declare an agricultural state of disaster. It joins other counties like Vulcan, Stettler, Foothills, and Paint Earth as the latest casualty. Staff with Cypress County say the situation is dire for farmers in the area, and this is the third year in a row that they've had to declare an ag disaster.
Our native grasses didn't even really come out of dormancy, so there's limited feed for animals, and hay and crops and that sort of thing are struggling. You know, some we hear the seed was planted in the spring, obviously, but there was no moisture to even germinate the seed. So inputs are high, and when it doesn't grow, obviously there's nothing to harvest, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a struggle here for people for sure.
Officials with the county told us estimated soil moisture in the region compared to the long-term normal is rated moderately low to as low as it's been in over 50 years. Wow. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith dished out a variety of mandate letters to her cabinet this past week. The one given to Health Minister Adriana LaGrange is calling for her to address EMS response times and get more obstetricians to areas like Lethbridge and Fort Macleod. But LaGrange was also given the green light to decentralize Alberta Health Services, nearly 15 years after the province centralized it. We break down what this could mean for Albertans later in the show with our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson, so be watching for that. And in other news, Premier Smith said she's disappointed in the federal government's proposals for net zero mandates and oil and gas production cuts, adding that Alberta will not recognize these federally imposed emissions reductions targets for the province's energy and electricity sectors, as they are under provincial jurisdiction. So this follows federal Environmental Minister Stephen Guilbeault announcing he'll be publishing policy guidelines to dictate circumstances for the flow of future federal investment to Canadian oil and gas firms. And in a statement, Smith called the proposed mandates unconstitutional and extremely harmful to Alberta's and Canada's economies. Smith did give an update on her government's efforts, though, to provide relief from high fuel prices, saying her government made it official and will suspend the provincial fuel tax for another half a year, saving Albertans 13 cents per litre each time they fill up at the pumps.
This will ensure that you get to keep an extra $6 to $18 in your pocket every time you fill up your vehicle. Pausing the full fuel tax on gasoline and diesel for the rest of the calendar year will put hundreds of millions of dollars back into the pockets of Albertans. But lower gas prices don't just leave more money in your pockets every time you fill up, so that you and your families can save more of your hard-earned money. It also means lower cost to deliver services and supplies that Albertans need to live. Whether it's groceries, baby formula, or laundry detergent, lower fuel costs means shipping products to stores costs less, meaning that you'll be paying less for the things your family needs at the checkout. Many of Alberta's small business owners also rely on fuel to deliver the supplies and services Albertans need to live. So extending the fuel tax holiday will reduce costs for many of our small businesses and will help to support job creators amidst an increasingly challenging global economy.
Coming up after the break, we hear from the province's new Minister of Affordability and Utilities after receiving his mandate letter from the Premier this week. Will he help with the rising cost of living? Find out next.
A lot of people who have been on the regulated rate option have seen their prices and their bills go up significantly this summer again. And we're being asked, hey, why and what are you going to do? And we're looking at the real root issues of this, which is solid base load supply of energy that will help mitigate the volatility of renewables or other sources that come on and go off.
Welcome back. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's new cabinet found themselves busy this week after receiving their mandate letters. Our Minister of Affordability and Utilities, Nathan Neudorf, tells us his government will continue to try and help Albertans dealing with a very high cost of living. Outside of the provincial fuel tax being suspended till the end of the year, Neudorf says utility help may also be on the way.
We're very closely looking at the entire utility system, particularly electricity and natural gas. A lot of people who have been on the regulated rate option have seen their prices and their bills go up significantly this summer again. And we're being asked, hey, why and what are you going to do? And we're looking at the real root issues of this, which is solid base load supply of energy that will help mitigate the volatility of renewables or other sources that come on and go off quite literally with the weather.
The former Alberta Justice Minister has been issued a citation from the Law Society of Alberta. Casey Madu will have to undergo a hearing for allegedly engaging in conduct that undermined respect for the administration of justice. It stems from an incident in March of 2021 when Madu was issued a distracted driving ticket in Edmonton. Madu told media that he called the Edmonton police chief to ensure he was not being racially profiled or singled out for surveillance given his position, but says that he did not ask the chief to waive the ticket. Madu was stripped of his ministerial position in January of 2022. The Law Society says such conduct is deserving of sanction, but no date is yet scheduled for the hearing. The Alberta government, along with members of the Blood Tribe, held a groundbreaking ceremony Wednesday to mark the beginning of what will soon be a new 75-bed recovery community for those facing addictions. The community just outside of Cardston is part of 11 other centers across the province that will be available to all Albertans. Angela Stewart has the details.
Those who battle with addictions will soon have a chance at a fresh start. Wednesday officially kicked off the construction for a new Indigenous-led recovery community on Blood Tribe territory.
The connection that the Blood Tribe members have with the land is sacred, and we plan to honor this connection through a new facility, from the design of the building to the treatment and the healing that takes place inside of it.
A $30 million investment from the province in partnership with the Blood Tribe will see a 75-bed recovery site be built on this land just outside of Cardston, making it the first Indigenous-led recovery site. The Blood Tribe Recovery Community is one of 4 facilities to be built on First Nation communities, which will operate under a holistic approach.
That one person, through addiction, we need to take care of the whole self, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. So we will incorporate some of our own teachings, our own healing methods, and we will integrate with the Western model.
Up to 300 people every year will have access to the facility and will be available for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people.
Some of these people need to learn how to live again. They need to learn how to make a bed, to have a cup of coffee, as an example. And that's what they're going to be provided. So that journey may take as long as it's going to take. And some people may be there for a year. Some people may be there for a year and a half. But the point is that when they exit that system, they're going to be in a better place from which they started.
The Alberta government anticipates the site to be fully operational by 2024, with construction beginning late this fall. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
The Alberta government is investing $10 million to Indigenous partners through the Bridging Classrooms Communities pilot program. Officials say the new funding will help Alberta Native Friendship Centres build relationships with local school authorities to advance reconciliation. The money will also support the hiring of community connection workers to strengthen student relationships with Indigenous communities. And the province also announced more funding to support kids and youth involved in sports. Sport and Tourism Minister Joseph Scow says families and nonprofit groups can now apply for funding from Every Kid Can Play program. $3 million will go towards Kids Sport Alberta to subsidize registration costs for families who are struggling financially.
I'm happy to let everyone know that applications are now open for families to receive sports support and registration fees. Kids Sport is a fantastic organization that has a wealth of experience granting funds to youth and children to help subsidize the cost of participating in their favorite sport. We're happy to partner with them as they administer this program on our behalf. In addition, grant applications are now open for local and provincial nonprofit organizations that provide sport and recreation programs for their communities.
After the break, we dive into what a decentralized healthcare in Alberta could look like. That's next. Welcome back. Like many other cabinet ministers, Health Minister Adriana LaGrange received marching orders from her premier boss. In her mandate letter, LaGrange was given the green light to decentralize Alberta Health. This comes close to 15 years after the province completed a multi-stage, multi-year process to centralize it. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson says Albertans would need to get a health spending account if AHS were decentralized. Here's part of that interview with Hal Roberts and Tyler.
So Danielle Smith has been releasing her mandate letters sort of a couple at a time over the last week or two here. So we've seen a handful of them. But as you say, the most recent one is the health one. And the health one, particularly on the health spending account, is sort of interesting because last week, I believe it was, the Service Alberta Minister, Nate Glubish, I think, got his mandate letter, and it was sort of wishy-washy, a little bit vague on the health spending account thing. It was sort of look into the technology to see if this would be a viable proposal sort of thing. So that sort of seemed like it was a little bit up in the air, but now we have the health minister's mandate letter that seems to suggest this proposal's back on. So that's sort of the big line item, I guess we could say, in the health minister's mandate letter. But there's a few other things, as you mentioned, getting more obstetricians, focusing on rural medicine. And the other interesting thing that came out of this was the exploration of decentralizing Alberta Health Services, which of course was just centralized, 15 years ago or so. We'll have to see what happens there. Of course, it was a huge controversy the last time it happened. I can't imagine it's going to be any less controversial this time around.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of talk among the municipalities was also decentralizing the EMS dispatch services, right? So ambulance would get to certain locations a lot quicker as well. I know Lethbridge was on board and a lot of other municipalities as well, Red Deer too. So now, Tyler, the mandate letter to Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz caused a little bit of controversy. Can you explain why?
Well, basically the sense from critics, not that critics ever have anything positive to say, is that there was not all that much environment in the Environment Minister's mandate letter. There's a fair bit of stuff in there about the oil and gas sector in terms of promoting it as the most environmentally responsible petroleum on the planet. There are items about oil sands tailings ponds, cleanup, that sort of thing that's sort of been, these have been issues for a long time and are, regular things that the Environment Minister is going to be looking at. But the sort of big item that didn't seem to be in there that critics were concerned about was anything about coal mining on the eastern slopes of the Rockies. That's been a big issue down your way when there was the 1976 coal policy was suddenly dropped, and then the small town mayors got upset about it, and the UCP said, this is just city slickers being mad about it, but actually it wasn't at all. And so I think the policy is back on. But anyways, the whole coal mining thing did not seem to make an appearance, which sort of raised a few eyebrows among people who pay attention to this sort of stuff. So it'll be a bit interesting. The sense from some of these critics was that, the environment's taking a little bit of a back seat to other priorities here. But whether that's fair or not, I think it is fair to say that there is a little bit more focus on the industry side of the environment, for example, than would be the case if, say, Rachel Notley had won the last election.
Now, Tyler, Environment Minister Schultz was scheduled to meet with Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault this week to discuss emissions targets. As you know, the UCP disagrees with the Liberals on a number of policies, including a net zero electricity grid.
Yeah, so this would basically mean that there needs to, well, a net zero electricity grid, net zero emissions from the electricity grid, which is a bit of a problem for Alberta because although we've largely eliminated, dirty fuel such as coal, the bulk of the electricity grid is natural gas at this point. So it's sort of a challenging target for the province to hit, and that's been quite controversial. Now, the other thing that was expected to come up in this meeting is the net zero emissions from the oil and gas sector, which is supposed to be in by 2030, I think. Now, part of the reason why this is controversial is there was a report issued earlier this week that basically concluded that in order to hit that target of net zero, the oil and gas sector would need to reduce production by about 1.3 million barrels per day, which is a pretty significant cut to the oil sector's output. So, there's a fair bit of distance, I think it's fair to say, between what the Alberta government wants and what the federal Liberal government wants on some of this emissions stuff. I have a hard time imagining that Stephen Guilbeault is going to bend all that much on emissions targets, but certainly we're seeing a tamping down of some of the fireworks maybe that we've seen over the last few years.
In the coming days, we'll be diving into both the positives and negatives of a decentralized system. On the other side of the break, though, we discuss how the just transition policies will impact so many in our energy sector. Keep it right here. Welcome back. Public policy impacts our lives in a variety of ways. It can also impact major industries in Canada, including our energy sector. Up next, Hal Roberts chats with David Lease from the Frontier Centre for Public Policy to discuss how the federal government's just transition policies will impact so many in our energy sectors.
David, let's begin with this question. Can you explain why Canadians should really care about public policy?
Well, I think it makes everything in terms of our lives. It's choices about the small things to the big things. So in many ways, it determines what kind of lives we're going to lead. Is it one of hope and prosperity, or is it one of, frankly, bad things? I mean, we have a lot of choices that we need to make in our country today.
So how does the Frontier Centre for Public Policy get involved in Canada's political landscape, whether it's provincially or federally?
We try to examine issues based on facts and evidence. We have a bias, and that is towards a free and democratic society. We believe in the age-old traditions of respect for individual rights and freedoms. And we try to be very discerning in terms of certain principles that empower individuals. So we will look at issues from healthcare to transportation, taxation, economic performance, and we say, look, how does that help the individual and communities go forward in a successful way?
So what are your thoughts on the carbon taxes, which are impacting so many Canadians, including our farmers right now across Canada?
Well, we think that policy, as an example, is really bad. It disempowers individuals to be able to live their lives. It doesn't do what it claims it to do in terms of protecting the environment. All those carbon taxes go back right into general revenues. So it's a bit of a farcical policy. It's really not about policy. It's about appearing to be policy.
Now, David, when you present well thought out policies to our federal government, the Trudeau government, what kind of response do you get, if any?
Well, we get a number of responses. We have people who are, for instance, elected officials and bureaucrats, and a number of us have been in those senior roles. So we know what it's like to be in office. And the response can either be one of appreciation, welcoming that there's a group of well-intended team of experts and former officials that take the time to carefully examine and look at the evidence. Because often when you're in power, you don't really have any time to look at those issues in more depth. So it takes a lot of effort. So people appreciate that.
What are your thoughts on the Trudeau government and their just transition policy, just transitioning away from the energy sector, oil and gas, more into green technology? What are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, if you look at the just transition policy, it's really a just transition, we would say, to nowhere. We would say it's actually not policy based on reality, unfortunately, in the sense that what we're looking at is a transition that is really all about shutting down the oil and gas industry. And we think this will have enormously negative impacts on people, the industry. This is going to negatively impact families big time. So we think it's a disaster. We need affordable energy in our country. That's been historically a great strength in terms of our economy. And to call this a just transition all about, quote, the environmental climate change is really an overstatement. We think that over 80 years, the debate is about 1 degree over 80 years. And so we think that that's really an overreaction to what's going on. We've always had climate change, and what we have now is really we would say, a kind of an effort to really shut down all fossil fuels, really under the false moniker of a crisis, when in fact it is not.
So how do you think Alberta can really fight back? I know Premier Daniel Smith has talked about the Alberta Sovereignty Act in the past to protect oil and gas workers here across the province. It's a big industry, right? And it also helps support the equalization payments, which make the way to central and eastern Canada. Do you think maybe that Daniel Smith would eventually invoke that Sovereignty Act?
I think that there's elements of it that need to be invoked, in the sense that this is an existential threat to, I would argue, not just simply Alberta's economy, but Canada. And it begs the question, how does Alberta, let alone other provinces, work together to rebalance our federal system? Our federal system never envisioned the federal government basically trying to take over everything. Our partners in our federation are the provinces and the federal government, and they need to work together. But the federal government is now intruding systematically in every provincial area.
After the break, we dive into what made headlines in southern Alberta this week, so don't go away. Welcome back. $1 million has been approved by the City of Medicine Hat to help support Halo Air Ambulance over 2 years. This is the first time the city has approved support for Halo, which operates out of the Gas City.
For us, we've always been invested in Medicine Hat. We've always wanted to be a part of the community. This is the reflection of that now, after years of advocacy and serving the community in ways that I think perhaps is somewhat intangible. But 19% of our call volume last year was in the City of Medicine Hat, calls that resulted from the City of Medicine Hat, whether that was an interfacility transfer from the hospital or whether that was support in fire, search and rescue, or law enforcement. And so I think that was an important statistic to get out there and have a conversation about, so that we could really validate the necessity of the investment and making sure that it was a good fit.
Paul Carolan says they hope to eventually expand to other cities in the province, including Lethbridge. Well, Zeller's department store will be coming back to Lethbridge. 21 new pop-up shops were announced this week, with Lethbridge listed as one of the locations. The store will operate out of Hudson's Bay at the Melcor Center. In a news release, the president of Hudson's Bay says, quote, pop-ups are a key ingredient in our expansion strategy, allowing us to explore and test in new markets, gather valuable customer insights, and fine-tune our offering before establishing larger format store locations, end quote. Other locations which will feature the pop-up stores in Alberta include Red Deer and St. Albert. A man familiar to country fans will be this year's Whoop Up Days Parade Marshal in Lethbridge. Cor Blunt will be leading the charge on August the 22nd. The theme for this year's festivities will be celebrating Southern Alberta, Canada's agriculture destination, which the Lethbridge and District exhibition says aligns nicely with Lund's music. During his country music career, the Alberta star has won a Juno and multiple CCMA awards. In a news release, Lund says it's an honor to lead the Whip Up Days Parade in Lethbridge, especially given the theme of this year's event celebrating Southern Alberta. So excited for him. The Roxy Theatre in Coleman, Alberta has been out of commission since 2003. A group calling themselves Crow's Nest Can-Do is doing their part to try to raise the funds needed to help rebuild the theatre. Staff with the organization told us work on the theatre will begin next month following a $250,000 donation from Vancouver-based mining company Teck. BCN's Micah Quinn has more on the long-storied history of the Roxy Theatre.
Back in 2021, members of the Crow's Nest Can-Do organization purchased the Roxy Theatre with the goal of returning it to its former glory.
It's one of three only left in Western Canada, where the other two are operating and this one is not operating, so soon to be. Hopefully.
There's one in Wainwright and one in Victoria.
Staff with the group told us the support to get the Roxy Theatre back up and running has been nothing short of amazing.
And there's a lot of local talent here, lots, and they can't wait for this place to open. I've already had to turn business away that they're already asking to use the Roxy, and I have to tell them that I'm sorry. Still might be a few years before we're open, but that's a good sign that they're already asking to use the building.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Green Acres Foundation celebrated the 50th anniversary of one of their lodges Thursday. Blue Sky Lodge opened back in 1973 in Lethbridge with 50 suites available to residents. Over the years, the facility has been able to expand and now houses up to 67 residents in our city.
You know, it's kind of surprising when you look at the building and you think that thing is 50 years old, because it doesn't look 50 years old. It's very well maintained, and again, it's a home. It's not an institution, it is someone's home. So that to me, it's going to be here in another 50 years. I'm sure it will be. Different people, but it'll still have the same vibrancy and the same feel and the same fun for the residents.
Seniors have built our community. They've built our community, and as we come to an event like this, I can't be more happy with how exciting it is to be here. We have an event that we do on a regular basis every couple of weeks. It's Coffee with a Counselor, and we come to the different Green Acres facilities throughout the community and ask them what some of their concerns are. A lot of them are very similar. And, if it's busing and assess a ride, etc. But to sit down and just hear from those that built our community is really heartwarming.
Green Acres Foundation has 20 different locations across southern Alberta. Well, after the break, we find out more about fishing and hiking in and around the Crow's Nest Pass. Caves, creeks, and trails are next, so keep it right here.